Ulduar is widely considered as one of the best raids of the Wrath of the Lich King expansion. The reasons for this are many and varied, but can be distilled down to a few key elements. First and foremost, Ulduar offered a level of challenge that was unmatched by any other raid in the expansion. The bosses were difficult and required skilled coordination from the players, making it a true test of skill and teamwork. Players had to work together to overcome the obstacles and defeat the bosses, making the experience all the more rewarding. Another aspect that made Ulduar so memorable was the sheer scale and scope of the raid. The instance was massive and players could explore its many nooks and crannies to find secrets and hidden treasures. The architecture of the instance was also truly awe-inspiring, featuring intricate designs and towering structures that added to the overall sense of wonder and adventure. Another reason why Ulduar was so popular was the variety of boss encounters. There was a good mix of traditional tank and spank fights, as well as more complex encounters that required players to use their heads and think creatively. This variety kept players engaged and on their toes, preventing boredom and ensuring that each encounter felt fresh and exciting. It also introduced vehicle combat in raid environments, for what I think was the first time in this sense, as the most other vehicle types of combat was us being on a dragon, like in the Eye for example, while this time we are on actual vehicles. The storytelling in Ulduar was also top-notch. The lore surrounding the instance was rich and fascinating, and the boss encounters were designed to highlight this lore and bring it to life. The storytelling in Ulduar was so well done that it was easy for players to get lost in the world and fully immerse themselves in the experience. It also helped that the lore itself was deeply attached to the lore of the Storm Peaks, which most players or people went through in their questing process while leveling up to max level, plus the fact that you had to grind some reputations over there at max level as well, so a lot of people were already attached to this lore before the raid even came out, and with the raid out, it offered some type of peace to everyone who was invested into the story. It's basically like you waited 6 months for the finale of your favorite TV show to find out how it ended, and now you finally get to watch it. Finally, the loot in Ulduar was some of the best in the expansion. The gear was highly sought after and players worked hard to obtain it. The rewards for defeating the bosses were not only powerful and useful, but also visually stunning, making them a real source of pride for players who had earned them. In conclusion, Ulduar was the best raid of the Wrath of the Lich King expansion because of its challenging difficulty, awe-inspiring architecture, variety of boss encounters, top-notch storytelling, and coveted loot. The instance will always be remembered as a high point in the history of WoW, and a true testament to the skill and dedication of its players. Ulduar hard modes also introduced a challenge on a level never before seen by players in the World of Warcraft universe, as some of the hard mode bosses were never killed until they got nerfed, and as a matter of fact, even in the relaunched version of Wrath of the Lich King Classic, the hard mode difficulty of XT002 Deconstructor was not slain before it got nerfed, indicating that even 15 years later, some of these bosses could not be bested. These hard modes also introduced a way for players to trigger a harder version of the boss without having to turn the entire raid into heroic mode, and it also gave them better rewards for completing the bosses on hard mode. This would serve as a beta or alpha version of what would eventually become heroic raiding in the next version, or in the next content patch, and it was Blizzard's first step into dividing raids into normal and heroic difficulties, striking a balance between making sure raids are doable for everyone, so everyone can experience the content they have put resources into making for the game, as well as offering people an actual challenge. Recently, Ulduar has been re-released to the world in the form of Wrath of the Lich King Classic, and as we have had some time to look at the raid now, done some runs both on 10-man and 25-man and on the hard modes, we can take a look at the raid from a more modern standpoint and see if it stands up to its reputation of being one of the best raids in WoW's history. So, how has Ulduar performed so far in Wrath Classic? First, the fact that the hard mode difficulty of XT002 in Deconstructor had to be nerfed even on Wrath Classic, to me definitely means that the difficult reputation of Ulduar was true back in the day. The simple fact is that when Ulduar was originally released, the skills of the average WoW player was far lower than it is today, and if bosses are so difficult they can't even, even in today's environment they have to be nerfed, they were definitely difficult back in 2009. Going over to the demographic side of things, we can see that even by today's standards, Ulduar is a very popular raid, albeit not as popular just yet as it has been hyped up to be. For the entirety of Phase 1 of Wrath Classic, I kept hearing people say, just wait until Ulduar comes out, and Ulduar is a much better raid than Naxxramas, and also, Phase 1 is boring. Personally, I very much agree with these statements, but looking at the demographics, it tells a somewhat different story. So far, the peak of raiding numbers in Wrath was during Naxxramas itself, with a peak of 626,464 players raiding Naxxramas within a single week. Towards the end of Phase 1, we saw a drastic decline in players participating in raiding activities, which makes sense as that was also during Christmas times, and when Phase 2's release date was released or announced, some people stepped back into Naxxramas to get their last pre-Ulduar BIS items for progression, and now raiding is rising in popularity once again. Still, the peak of raiding numbers in Ulduar is sitting on 515,405 players, which is more than 110,000 players less than it was during peak Naxxramas times, which could possibly indicate less people being interested in Ulduar. But these demographics does have a couple of hidden mistakes, as this counts total players logged within the raid. That means if I, as one person, raid on 10 different characters, I suddenly count as 10 people on these charts. This is where the difficulty and time commitment of the raid comes in and plays a huge part in portraying how many people are actually doing the raids. Naxxramas is a very easy raid and is mostly done in 2 to 3 hours by every single raid group in Phase 1 of Wrath Classic. This means it is very easy for people to set up multiple characters, to do several raid nights per week, and a lot of people did in fact do this, especially in bigger servers with GDKP raids, but in general, people do like gearing up alts and doing raids. Ulduar already presents a much bigger challenge and time commitment, and the people that had 10 characters running Naxxramas every single week are definitely not running Ulduar on all those 10 characters right now, due to their simply not being enough time to do so. If we go over to Warcraft logs, we can get a somewhat good indicator of the time commitment required, where Naxxramas speedruns are completed in under 1 hour, while Ulduar speedruns are close to 2 hours, more than double the time required. So what I'm trying to say here is that because of the duplicate raid logging by people raiding on several characters, the fact that Ulduar provides a bigger challenge and has a much bigger time commitment attached to it, while also sitting at around 80% of the amount of raiders we had at peak week of Phase 1, to me this means that there could very well be more people raiding Ulduar right now than we had during peak week of Naxxramas, and I would not be surprised to see the demographics chart absolutely skyrocket in a couple of weeks as people start clearing faster and faster on their mains and start running more Ulduar runs on their alts. Let me know your Ulduar experiences in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching this video, and as always, I'll see you again very soon.